Looks like wait a few more seconds, but Anna Maria, are we all set to go?
Excuse me?
We're all ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, good, we'll go. February 12th, Downtown Action Committee hearing. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. If we could please start with a roll call.
Roger Jansen.
Present.
Nick Mihelich.
Present.
Brian Shakowitz.
Present.
Stephen Graham.
Present.
Michael Cuevas.
Present.
David Felton.
Present.
Bragman Filchin.
Present.
John Lee Dizon. Let the record reflect that John Lee Dizon is not present. Gregory Gabriel.
Present.
Okay, thanks. Item 2, minutes in your packet from the December hearing. Anyone have any comments or corrections? I was not here, so I don't. Anyone want to make a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make approve.
Okay, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. Item 3, report by City Urban Designer, Ms. Ponte.
Good morning, Ana Maria Ponte, City Urban Designer. For the record, I have good news today. We have a new member on our board, is Mr. Gregory Gabriel. He has a bachelor's degree in urban planning from Florida Atlantic University and is currently working for the Transportation Planning Agency that just moved to the downtown area as a transportation planner and has been working for them for 2 years. I'm gonna pass it to him so he can introduce himself. Welcome to the board and thank you for your service.
Good morning again, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to be a member of this board. I recently moved 2 years ago to West Palm Beach, originally from Miami, and took a job with the TPA, and I felt it was necessary for me to be active in the community that I stay in. And over the weekend, Friday, not weekend, the West Palm Beach did won 2 awards for the Climate Street that the TPA awarded them for the great work, and your city engineer did 1 award as well. So this tells a lot that we were able to showcase the great work the city of West Palm Beach is able to do to other partner agencies in Broward and Miami. Thank you.
Great, welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Pleasure to have you. Anything else from you?
That's all I have for today.
Okay, perfect. And I'm going to skip past any remarks by the chairperson. We'll go straight to declarations of ex parte communication. Anyone on the committee today, anything to declare with today's cases? Okay, seeing none. Move on to public hearing. Anyone that will be presenting testimony today on either of the cases, kindly stand and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
And then if anyone in the audience will be speaking, see if you could fill out one of the cards that are available on the back and hand it to the front if you're not on the regular agenda. So, continued cases, now new cases. Case number 1, Downtown Action Committee Case 20-01, request by Alexander Ehrenholz of Cutler and Herring on behalf of WP Leasing LLC. If we could kindly have the applicant's presentation. Yes. See, I remember that time too.
Hey, for the record, Alex Ehrenholz from Cutler and Herring. So I'm here today to talk about a variance request on 207 6th Street. Okay. For reference, it is between 6th and 7th Street, north of Quadrille, just west of Flagler. It was Glidden Spina's office for a while, but it was recently purchased by another individual. Essentially, the whole request is to build a fence around the property. Currently, there's a lot of cut-through traffic between it. It's open to both streets, and there's a heavy threat of security. The owner company, which is to not be put into public record, but they are a prominent family that has had security threats in the past. And the owners here, if you want to hear a little bit further in detail about the security threats, but in essence, they had a 50-person protest recently. People stood outside for a couple hours, chanting to have them be removed from the area. So there is a very legitimate security threat. There was a letter submitted with the application submittal from their security team that requests that a fence would be very, very necessary in order to help them keep everything under control. There's also recent correspondence with the City of West Palm Police Department that says that a 6-foot fence would be extremely necessary and required of this area because of just the legitimate security concerns. So the current condition right now is just an open parking lot from 7th Street. It has an entrance from a little bit further down to the west on 7th Street. It has another entrance. Staff is requesting that we close that to be just a pedestrian access only. We're okay with that. Along 6th Street, there is a current access, and that would also be gated. So the first one and this one would be gated for just vehicle access, and it'd be a sliding gate. It'd be, I'll show that in a second. So in the top right corner is a elevation of what the gate would look like. It's pretty standard pole gate with little spiky ends on top, and that'd be black. It's very similar to a fence that's down the street. This is our request as submitted. The far left one at the top would be a pedestrian gate. So the parking would end to be a turnaround space on the bottom left. And then there'd be 2 gates along the east side, north and south. It would just be a rolling gate, and we're requesting that it at least be 5 feet high. Staff is requesting that it's 4 feet high, just because that's a minimum fence height, but we need at least 5 feet for some security, because 4-foot fence you could easily hop over, especially with the legitimate security concerns. So as I said, we submitted a letter from the company into the evidence and to the record, and 5 feet is very necessary for security. West Palm Beach Police Department said 6 feet is probably a little bit more required. We'll install vegetation to block most of the fence where we're allowable. It's pretty tight, so we'll put a hedge where necessary, so it's not just a fence and pretty blatantly right there. And then it finally restricts through traffic on a private street that's currently just wide open for people going Rosarian and cutting through from the Jupiter Medical Center and the various buildings around there, just using that street as a cut through, which would just block off them. So the owner's here if you have any really specific questions you want to ask him. But he doesn't think it's necessary to speak any further. And then Keith Spino is also here, who used to work on the property to speak.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex. My name is Keith Spina. I'm with Spina O'Rourke. And some of you may know, but just for those of you who don't, I bought this building 6 or 7 years ago, came to the city, was really excited. A lot of my friends thought I was crazy. It was this building that used to be on the north side of downtown, but outside of downtown, little did we all know the impact that the North Bridge changing would have. I consider it now on the north side of downtown, not north of downtown. But we bought the building. We came in, we designated it historic because it's a super cool building. We then went and worked with city staff, and we reshaped every single thing about it. One of the things that was when we first got it, and I remember having conversations with Anna Maria, and she was right at the end. I didn't feel that way when she first started talking about it. The parking used to be on this north side of the property, and you used to pull in from 7th Street, and then when you left, you backed out onto 7th Street. And she said, well, you can't do that. You have to put landscape and all these other things. And I was out of money at the time, and I couldn't stand it, but we did it, and thank God, because what a beautiful place to have our office for the next 5 years. And one of the things, another experience that I had when we first moved into the building is this isn't a driveway. This is a thoroughfare, highway, highly trafficked public city street, according to the people in the community, because FedEx, fire trucks, sanitation, everybody that has an office, a house, a school, a kid, they think that this is the way to get to 7th Street from 6th Street or vice versa, as opposed to going to Olive or Flagler. And, I used to park my car in front of the driveway. People would then drive around my car. It was a complete circus. Finally, I chalked it up to urban living, and I just said, people are going to drive through our parking lot. People are going to park in our parking lot. We have little stickers. We used to boot people. We quit doing that because everybody that got booted was a friend of mine. And they would then call me and say, hey, can you get this guy to take the boot off my car? And the guy that was booting everybody said, you can't call me every time you boot a car. and we need to make money. And so long story short, we settled and we lived there. Then we had, which to us was an incredible compliment about our work. And it was also incredible, we think, event for the city of West Palm Beach, because there was an incentive that helped me renovate that building. There was historic designation that we think helped save a building. There was a city process that we thought was incredible, and at the end we got this incredible compliment, a private family from New York City who I didn't know at the time. I now do know them and am friends with a couple of these guys. They're some great people. And they said, we want to buy your building. I said, it's not for sale. And long story short, it was in the paper. They kept raising the price till I said, I'm out. You can have my furniture, my TVs, my computers. You can have everything you want. And it was an incredible opportunity. And it showed, the incentive that the city has to encourage economic investment and development in our city actually works. We're now in a new property just a couple blocks away on the corner of Banyan and Olive. And I was over there today at this building. I was kind of like pulled in, parked in my spot, walked in, saw all their stuff, and it was still pretty cool. But there's a really big change when the sale of the building and the new people have occupied it. They're a private family. They have a business that's, some would say is, controversial. We're not here to talk about politics, but we will say that I loved when people drove through the parking lot. I'd say hi to them, ask them to come on in, check out our office. Hopefully they'd hire us as an architect. These guys don't have that interest. And as Alex said, there's a couple things. One event that happened a couple of weeks ago, and they had a protest, and they had to bring in a team of security people. They had the city of West Palm Beach police giving them, direction and advice on how to deal with this. And it's a real security issue. After we sold the building, we lived in the building together for several months, and I had a lot of really interesting conversations with people in the community, and it made me feel really awkward at times. It actually made me feel really unsafe at times. I had 30 people that work as part of our team, and they would ask us, is this building okay? Like, are we going to have a problem? And so security is the number one topic we're talking about today. As Alex said, City of West Palm Beach Police Department came and said, you have to put a 6-foot fence up because that's what's going to make this a better place. The owner is settled with 5 foot. If you guys agree and want a 6-foot fence, I think they'd be fine with that. But city staff feels, the code says you need a 4-foot fence, and that's what city staff, so they're willing to do that. Closing up the entry, one of the things that we did, which we put this new entrance in, I don't think there's a reason to close it up, especially if it has a gate on it, but the owners have agreed that they're willing to do that. And then there's a couple of other things that are kind of really important. They're very unique about the property and when you have a high level of security, how it operates. The entrance off of 6th Street is going to be recessed. They're going to take out a parking space, increase a bunch of landscaping, and you'll be able to pull in, and that's their main entrance and exit. But they also have a secondary but very critically important, because of the traffic patterns around here. At different times, you want to be able to have the ability. If you go out of 6th Street and you head east, you cannot turn and go north on Flagler Drive. So if you want to go north, you have to go out of 7th Street, then you can go to Flagler, then you can turn. Because when the bridge came in, it put a curb cut in there that prevented that. So we have to have, but the way that people will exit when they leave the building in a car is they will pull up, they will buzz the buzzer, and then someone inside the building will open the gate and let them out. So that's it. I said, well, you're going to have one of the little things on your car, and you drive up and it opens, because then it wouldn't matter where the gate is, but that's not the level of security we're talking about. And so it's really critically important that the gate be located as close to the sidewalk as possible so that you can put the pedestal for security so you can pull your car up. If not, the pedestal for security would be in the middle of the drive aisle, and that doesn't work. And so that's really one of the things that I think city staff may suggest that they recommended, but it causes a real problem with security, and that's the reason we're doing all that. Another little item which kind of shows here on the site plan, one of the comments was, could we curb this and put little landscape islands? There is a curb. The curb runs, it's existing, has always been there, runs along the whole east side of the property. And so there is a curb there today. And then one of the other things that the owner wants to do probably sometime in the future is take and provide some covered parking. We've done some design studies that do some really cool covered parking. They are really excited about being able to do solar panels, something that would be, creative and cool. But if we do that, this is one of the areas that we think would be best, not right on the street where it's highly visible, but along the internal property line. So if we put those covered parking spaces, it would essentially wipe out the ability to have any sort of reasonable landscaping. We also, I know there's a couple of landscape architects up here, the little half triangle, we don't think, or half diamond, I guess it is a triangle, half diamond. We don't think you can really fit. By the time you put the curb in, keep the parking space, there's already a curb on the east side. We don't think you can get any landscaping. So hopefully you would agree with that and we don't do that. But other than that, we'd like to open it up for your questions and the staff's presentation. And then we'd like to reserve a right to, at least comment and respond to any concerns that staff has.
Sure,
So, thank
absolutely. Thanks for your presentation. Can we hear from staff, please?
Good morning. Elizabeth Levesque, Urban Design Planner. So understanding security risks, staff has to analyze based off of certain criteria when variances come in, and that is what we did, and that's what we're here to present to you today. So I won't go over this. The subject property is located within Lofton District 5. There are 4 different requests involved in this variance. One is a variance from section 94-109 to allow a fence within the minimum setback along 7th Street frontage. The second is a variance to allow a fence height to increase from 4 feet to 6 feet within the minimum setback from 7th Street along the side interior lines. 3 is a variance to allow an increase to the maximum height along the frontage of 7th Street from 4 feet to 5 feet. And 4 is a variance to allow an increase to the maximum height along the frontage on 6th Street from 4 feet to 5 feet. It's a lot. I'm going to go into it into detail so it's easy to understand. As stated, the property is the previous site, Spino O'Rourke and Partners, Architectural Office, and it was designated. So there won't be many changes. There won't be changes at all to this property. And keeping that in mind going forward, we also analyzed that into our review and analysis. So the little background, as stated, this was sold in July 2019 to the new owner listed as WP Leasing LLC. Justification statement and application does not list the specific owner's business as stated. They did include a statement that the company has association with people disliked by certain groups and the owners are a high-profile family, target of protests and threats, so that is all that staff had to go on for this variance request. As stated, site is a double frontage lot surrounded by other professional office uses along with residential uses, including Lofton Place and water tower on Flagler Drive. The site has a non-conforming parking lot and sidewalk. And current regulations regarding the height and the location for the fence were in place at the time of purchase. These current regulations that were in place at the time of purchase permit the following. A 4-foot high fence is permitted along street frontages within the DMP within the maximum setback. Fences have to be outside the minimum setback from those frontages. In this case, that's 12 feet. 6-foot high fences are permitted alongside property lines if they're outside the minimum setback. So the proposal that came with this variance request, what's shown here in blue, the applicant's proposing a 5-foot fence and gates within the minimum setback. Again, in this case, what the regulations require is that these fences would have to be outside the minimum 12-foot setback, and it would be a maximum of 4-foot height along this frontage if it's anywhere within the maximum setback. Shown here in red, these are the side interior lot line portions of the fence that would have to be 4 feet because they are also within that minimum setback from 7th Street. The regulation, as stated, in orange here highlighted, the applicant's proposing a 5-foot fence and gate, and the regulations would be a maximum of 4 feet along the frontage, anywhere within the maximum setback. So staff analyzed the submitted application, justification statement, and the letter that was applied from the security firm. Additionally, staff requested theft and suspicious incident-related police records for a 500-foot buffer around the subject property within the last 2 years. Found that residential and vehicular burglary in residential buildings was that did occur. These were mostly adjacent to Olive Avenue, and there were no reported incidents for office-related uses. Unrelated to this request, the city has recently reviewed the fence definition regulations in section 94-109. Staff does review all permits for fences within the DMP. We're very familiar with these regulations, and when we were analyzing these regulations, we did find that they are appropriate for downtown master plan area, and we made no changes to the height or location regulations, with the exception of athletic fields, which we did allow to increase in height. So again, staff's role is to analyze the requested variance based off the variance criteria in section 9438, and that is what we base our recommendations on. In staff's professional opinion, the variance criteria have been met for the following request: the request for location of the fence and gate within the minimum setback along 7th Street frontage, but that the variance criteria have not been met for the following request: the request for 5-foot fence height within the minimum setback along 7th Street, and the request for the 6-foot fence height along the side interior lines within the minimum setback, and a request for 5-foot fence height along the 6th Street frontage. So in regards to the fence within the minimum setback along 7th Street, staff found that the subject property's parking lot is non-conforming in regards to parking lot minimum setbacks as well as landscape buffer requirements for surface parking lots within the DMP. Additionally, the sidewalk is very narrow. It's approximately 3 feet, whereas the current requirement would regulate in 8-foot sidewalk. Staff does recognize that the fence cannot be located outside the minimum setback along this frontage without eliminating an entire row of parking spaces, which would be an unnecessary hardship on the applicant. So staff does find that the variance standards were met in this case. However, staff did review the request internally with the city engineering department to ensure that all code requirements would be met with the proposals, so when they came in after this variance request for permitting, that nothing else would come up that would prevent this gate or fence and gate in this location. From the engineering review, staff does recommend following modifications to the proposal. We recommend shifting the portion of the gate at the eastern exit further south to meet the minimum setback of 12 feet. This would reduce the overall variance request. This would also shift the landscape hedge out of the visibility triangle for cars exiting onto 7th Street, which was also an engineering concern. Staff also recommends closing one exit driveway on 7th Street, the western driveway. As current regulations do only permit one access point to each right-of-way, we do recommend maintaining this area for a pedestrian access gate. Additionally, we recommend reducing the portion along the side interior lot line on the western edge within the 12-foot setback to 4 feet. So just to show visually what I just said, this blue line illustrates the 12-foot setback line. Staff is recommending this portion here in red. This would be a 4-foot fence and gate. This would be the possible pedestrian gate where this exit only would be closed. This exit only, the configuration they had would be an inward swinging gate. It wouldn't be very effective in terms of circulation internally. Hearing what Mr. Spina said, we do believe that there's still enough room for cars exiting at that location. There's approximately 9 feet left in that traffic island. If you to put that that equipment that is necessary for cars to pull up and exit. This portion here in green illustrates a 6-foot fence that is permitted by right. As you can see on the eastern portion where we're recommending pushing the gate back, this would push that side interior lot line fence outside of the minimum setback, so they're permitted 6 feet by right, so that eliminates that portion of the variance request. On the the western side, you can see that piece of red that is along the side interior lot line. We are recommending 4 feet there, which is within the minimum setback. This would shift the landscape hedge south outside of the visibility triangle, and then along with the western side, I didn't note it here, but we do recommend, we have to keep that landscape hedge outside the visibility triangle on that side as well. Additionally, we are recommending some landscape hedges be planted in here. The site plan that was submitted, I contacted the applicant because it's different than what's on site right now. They do say that they're going to come in for a separate permit for some modifications to the parking lot to put these curb lines in, and we are recommending that a hedge be planted wherever possible along that eastern portion, because that is also adjacent to another parking lot, so it would be highly visible. Some justification for our recommendation: the minimum setback area in the downtown master plan area is intended to be an extension of the public realm. Now, we come into cases where we have non-conforming buildings, especially in this case, it's a historic building, which we're very happy about. We love having these buildings. We understand that there's site restrictions, but by pushing this gate on the eastern side, we are having that one portion of the frontage that can meet that intention. So again, staff's professional opinion is that the recommendations as stated would better meet the intention of the minimum setback purpose to the best extent possible. This would also reduce the overall request and improve the only portion along 7th Street that can meet setback requirements. So just to show an image, this is the portion here behind the 12-foot setback. You can see where staff is recommending the 6 feet start behind that setback, and you have the 4 feet along the frontage. And we're recommending that they remove a portion of the pavement, shift the landscape hedge back, plant some sod, and it would be a nice addition to this frontage. And then along the western portion here, you have the 4-foot pedestrian gate extending back, and then you have the 6-foot fence. In regards to the 5-foot fence along the 7th Street frontage, so we just talked about the location in the setback, which would permit a 4-foot fence. They are requesting to go to 5. Staff's professional opinion is that 4-foot fences are appropriate in the urban context for non-residential, when you're, again, this is supposed to be an extension of the pedestrian realm. Any higher than 4 feet can negatively impact the pedestrian experience, especially in the case like this, where the fence is so close to such a narrow sidewalk. You have anything higher than 4 feet, staff's professional opinion is that it really can take away from that pedestrian experience. It really emphasizes privatization when the goal of the DMP is for the again, keeping in mind security, and we are in favor of a fence here. We also want to have that pedestrian experience for the public realm. Staff did find that the variance criteria have not been met. Also, the 5-foot fence along the 6th Street frontage, again, this is the only area in 6th Street that can meet the intention of the minimum setback. And additionally, through engineering review, and this is important to note, staff found the request also does not meet a separate requirement in section 94.111. This was not part of the variance request, so we cannot vote on that here today. What this section requires is that vehicular entry gates must be set back 20 feet from the property line to allow for vehicular stacking. This reduces the impact on the sidewalk and the public right away. If you have less than 20 feet, you might have cars that are sitting on the sidewalk and pedestrians can't walk by without going into the roadway. So again, that was not part of the variance request, and if this were to come in for permit, we would not be able to permit this based off these regulations as well. So just an overview, staff recommends the proposed gate and fence be shifted approximately 3.5 feet north of the proposed location to meet the 20 feet requirement. 4 feet would be permitted by right at this location. Additionally, they probably won't want to do this, but if they do shift 35 feet back, they can have 6 feet. So the red line illustrates this 4-foot fence and gate, and the green line illustrates 6-foot fence that's permitted by right. So all applications, again, must be consistent with the standards. It's staff role to determine compliance. Staff finds the request for location of fence and gate within the minimum setback complies, specifically that special circumstance exists peculiar to the land with a non-conforming parking lot. Granting the variance would permit a fence along the frontage that all other lands within the district are permitted to have. It would be no more injurious to public welfare than the existing location of surface parking. In regards to the other variance request, specifically staff found the current regulations for the fence height were in place when the applicant purchased the land. This is unlike some previous cases where we've done fence height variances that were established long before these regulations. We just recently saw the YWCA school, which was established in the 1950s, long before these regulations. We found that another variance criteria that was not met, the building and lands can be put to put to use by any other professional office without the granting of this additional height. Important to note the variance is tied with the land. So if this current occupant vacates, the next occupant still could have the higher fence, which is detrimental to public welfare. 5-foot fence would grant special privilege denied to other lands and professional office uses within zoning district. And that just overall, the granting of the variance for height would not be in harmony with general intent of DMP regulations and the comprehensive plan, which intends to create an enhanced public realm, which promotes interaction of community. So with that, staff does recommend approval for the variance for the minimum setback, the location of the fence and minimum setback along 7th Street with some conditions, as previously mentioned. The applicant shall maintain a hedge along the outside of the fence along 7th Street frontage. The applicant shall install a hedge along the inside of the interior lot lines where possible. Applicant shall remove western vehicular gate along 7th Street and accommodate a pedestrian access gate. Applicant shall shift the eastern gate along 7th Street to meet the minimum 12-foot setback. And the applicant shall move vehicular gate on 6th Street to meet the minimum 20-foot required stacking distance per section 94-111. And then staff does recommend denial for the other fence variances. Thank you. I understand that was long, but I appreciate and happy to answer any questions.
That's great, thank you. Just one quick question for the applicant before we go to questions. On staff's recommendations on item 1, I guess this question for Mr. Spina. A through E, which of those do you either agree with or disagree with? So the first one was the hedge. The hedge is okay, right? A?
Yeah.
And B, the hedge inside.
By the way, next meeting, we're going to have Liz do our presentation. So.
What's that?
We're going to have Liz do our presentation next time.
Yeah, I know. Well, we used to do them first, which was great. It took all your order. And then C was the west. You're okay with that one, right?
So there's a couple items that are really important. So the first one on 6th Street.
Yeah, it was D, item D.
Okay, so on 6th Street, there's, between 16 foot and 20 foot, the only real impact, and I'm glad there's some architects up here, is if you take and go to 20 versus 16, you take the gate and you stick it right in front of a window in the building. And we think the architecture is really significant. It's a great example. That's why we designated it. So we just would like to keep it 4 feet back to 16 feet.
So that was, and I think item D was the one you were trying to keep parallel versus the 12-foot setback on the 7th Street gate, right?
Yeah, and then on 7th Street, despite what I say, and I also heard city staff's opinion, the security experts we have a team of security experts on the owner's side, and it does not work for their security team to have the gate on 7th Street set back, because despite what kind of sounds, 9 feet, you can kind of half a car, it just doesn't work, and their security is the reason we're here.
Okay,
right?
Thank you.
And then the other thing that's critical is the 5 feet. 4 feet, I can probably hurdle a 4-foot fence.
No, I got that one.
Yeah,
okay, thanks for the clarification. And then is all in agreement that the one-way exit is okay with site planning? And fire and all that, the one-way exit on 7th as described? There's no ingress off of 7th, correct?
Right. I mean, that's an existing condition right now. And it's one-way entry from 6th.
Okay, beautiful. Thanks. Real quick, so any comments from anyone in the audience, public on this case? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion, then we'll move to questions of the board to either the staff or the applicant and sort of kick this around. So I think we all understand what the issues are, and who wants to go? All right, Stephen.
I got questions. I'll start with staff. A couple of things. These are clarifications. In your report, When the recommendation saying the gate on 7th Street needs to be set back 12 feet, the vehicular gate. In page, I think it's page 12 of your staff report, you mentioned moving the pedestrian gate south as well, but I don't see that reflected in the recommendation. I just want some clarification as to whether that is something that's being requested or not.
No, that was something that I had originally put in there, and I mistakenly did not remove that.
Okay,
So,
all right,
yes,
that's fine.
Sorry.
No problems. These things happen. Second question, the historic designation of the property. This fence, I'm glad we've got architects in the room too, because I'm a simple planner, but the architectural style, does that go through any review by the historic preservation planner, or what type of review happens with the style of the fence?
It does not. I mean, I personally talked to Frederick Mittner and asked for her opinion, and she was fine with with
All
that.
right. Okay. And then thirdly, regarding the fence, I know you said that, if it was moved back 35 feet, it could be 6 feet in height. I don't know what, I think this is an office, where we're told it's a very high profile business, but pretty simple Google search tells you this is going to be an office use in this premises. If this business was to be located out of downtown, could they do a 6-foot fence around a property, I'm assuming, in another zoning district somewhere?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I'm
Okay.
not.
Yes,
Outside
outside
the
the
front
downtown
setback.
master plan. Yeah, they
yes.
could do a 6-foot fence if they were in another location outside this area where they chose to come.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, then that's my question for staff. A few questions for the owner. When did the owner buy the property? I don't know if
July 2019 is
Okay.
what is stated on
All right.
PAPA.
Either the owner or the applicant might be able to answer this question for me. Is you mentioned you seem to be relying a lot on security here. I don't know if you've got any security professionals with you, but you made some statements that the West Palm Beach Police have stated that a 6-foot fence is required. I don't see that anywhere in our backup. Do we have evidence of that?
We do. We have an email. We can share it with staff, or we
Okay.
the officer was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised if that's such an important issue that this wasn't something that was relied on in your report. But that clarifies. That's all the questions I have right now. I've probably some more to reserve for comment and discussion amongst the board.
Absolutely.
It was just real quick. It was a William A. Dame Senior, number 1360, crime prevention officer at City of West Palm Beach. He's the one that sent.
When did you receive that email?
We received it. Was it a couple days ago?
Yeah, 2 days ago, so we can add it to the record.
Okay, thanks.
Roger?
Go ahead, Brian.
Hi, Liz,
Yes.
have you heard from any of the neighbors on this request?
I have not heard from
Notice
any of the
requirement?
neighbors, no. I just wanted to state for the record that, yes, we did not ever receive that email, so we weren't familiar with that until we heard it today. No, we did not hear from any neighbors.
Right.
I also pulled up this image for a reason. I did not personally go out to measure how far back these windows go. There is a pane in the middle. I'm not sure. I believe that is behind the 20 feet from the property line. So there is that option as well for the rolling gate to be located at that location.
Yeah, I mean, if they were asking for a height increase on 6th Street, and the fence or gate was going to be across 50 or even 75% of the frontage, I'd be concerned. But really, this building fronts right onto 6. It takes up most of that property boundary. So I find the setback's going to be helpful. 4 feet difference isn't going to make a big deal. They're here for security, and this board just last year has approved multiple fence height increases for residential properties and other properties. I think it's a school property. And we've increased the heights of these, and staff recommended approval on things like topography and straight security. So I just happened in 07th. I walk by it every second day. And the pedestrian experience right now has been enhanced anyway because of what's happened with the parking lot that Mr. Spina spoke about. A 1 foot difference in the height isn't going to change that. If it provides that additional security they need, it's a positive thing. We want to encourage people coming here, and we want them to know their people are safe and that it's a safe place to go. In terms of that 1 foot increase if they didn't set it back. This is actually for Mr. Spina. Do you want to convert that western access to a pedestrian gate, or can you live with that as a pedestrian gate? 'Cause
No, we
right now it's
didn't want to
vehicular.
convert it to a pedestrian gate. And it's kind of interesting, you know, I brought the building to the city 6 years ago, and they thought it was incredible that we
Multiple.
turned all the parking and left the west entrance and all that. But the applicant is willing to compromise, and they're willing to convert the western entrance to pedestrian gate only to take the trash out. They have trash cans, and they wheel them to the street a couple of times a week, and they're willing to do that. You know, the other thing, by the way, if you take the 6th Street entrance and you move it to 20 foot, then we can go to 6 foot and don't have to ask for anything, but they're willing to keep it at 5 foot. And 5 foot is safe, 6 foot starts to get pretty tall and obnoxious. And, you know,
Again,
so those are the, you know, we like to always think when we come here, the reason we're here today, you know, the owner asked, why would he go into DAC? Why don't we just work with the city staff? Well, city staff has very clear criteria that they follow. The DAC is a vehicle that the city has put in place to allow for unique situations to make it a better place. You know, there's 25 people that this family brought to West Palm Beach to work, and they want a safe place for their team to work.
So the other point is of the building being fronting on 6th, the 7th Avenue pedestrian, environment isn't going to be, detracted from if the fence is 5 feet through that zone. Again, with the hedge there, it's going to be no different than what we experienced today. It's kind of a hodgepodge along 7th anyway, with cars backing out onto it in the adjacent lot. And there's a lot of activity with the school right across 7th, Rosarian. So, I mean, I'm not adverse to the height they're asking for the security standpoint, because I think they have the right kind of, decorative aluminum fence. It's not egregious. They're not asking for the full 6'5". We'll give them the security. We've done it, and we've given people higher fences. Is there any impact on the pedestrian pathway leading to the butcher shop? Is that impacted by this in any way? That's the one on the west side. There's a
Right,
pedestrian
yeah.
access along that. They're going to fence it off on their property. That's not going to have any impact on that flow for pedestrians, so I don't see a problem.
No. Just to clarify a couple things, I may have misheard. I believe Mr. Spina just said that if they set back the 20 feet, they can go to 6 feet. That's not correct. They would have to be 35 feet to go to 6 feet. So just for clarification
Completely
for the
not
record.
doable, yeah.
And then you were talking about some other cases that have just been in front of you. Just, again, those uses were established well before the regulations, and that is what we looked at, is the comparison of a use that came in during current regulations that through due diligence they could have seen that they weren't permitted to have those types of fences that they wanted. That type of security in a downtown area may not have been, it may have not been appropriate for the level of security that they need to be located within this area. And again, staff we just go based off the variance criteria, case by case basis, and we felt that in the other
I
cases.
understand that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any more, Brian? No? Who's next? Brad?
I have a quick question. I believe for the applicant or for Keith. I'm not that familiar with different security protocols. Can you elaborate a little bit on why the setback on the northeast vehicular gate is something that the owner is not happy about?
So they have a level of security that's a lot different than even City Hall has today. Every person that comes to the site gets checked by a person. So you don't walk in, even when you come to work. When you come to work, you have a card and you have to swipe it. You don't get to put a decal on the front of your, like I'm now in a building that has security, parking gates, not security, it's just parking access. And you can put a little tag on your car, you drive up, the gate opens, and then when you leave, the same thing, you drive up, the gate opens and closes. Their security is a different level than that. When they come in, they push the button, or if you work there, you swipe the card. But when you leave, you have to push the button. It rings security inside the building or outside, and they say, okay, who's leaving? We'll let you go, and they let them leave. And so the reason that we need the north gate closer to the street is so that a car can pull up, and I can maybe show you where it is, I'm not sure. So they can pull up and have the ability to open their window and talk to the person in the monitor. So, yeah, so right here, we have to get a monitor here so that when you're leaving, you pull up, you push the button, say, hi, I'm Keith Spina, I'm getting ready to leave. Security checks it. If we move the fence back, our security team says that you will not have enough room to get your car here and that the monitor will be here, which is now in the drive aisle. It's just literally not enough room.
Okay, I thought maybe there was something else. I understand that. I thought the 9 feet might be sufficient. The gate's going to be sliding, not swinging, correct?
We have looked at staff's recommendation, and our security experts say it's absolutely not enough. So, again, I'm not a security expert, but I can tell you what the owner's security team has said, and they are experts. And so, I said the same thing. Well, why don't I just put the thing on your car and drive up and the gate opens? I said, well, we don't do that. And so it's a unique situation.
Okay.
And, if you're out there a couple weeks ago and there's 50 or 100 people standing in the street where, the police had to finally come, it's a pretty, if you work there, you'd probably be a little nervous. And that's the security for their people is the issue. And and they've gone so far above and beyond by having a professional security team on site all the time, plus cameras, plus. But this is something that they feel. And like I say, the email, I just saw the email the first time today as well, but the police officer said, City of West Palm said, strongly recommend 6 foot, and we're okay with 5.
Let me ask you, last thing as a follow-up. If 9 feet, that the staff's recommendation would allow for 9 feet, if that isn't enough, did the security team say the minimum number of feet that is enough? Because presumably it wouldn't have to go all the way to the street.
We can find that out, and if we can, I'm sure we could work with staff. Is it 8, 7, 6? Is it something more than 0? And, maybe that's there just has to be, security is why we're here. And if we can pull off the level of security that they're looking for to make their employees safe every day, then that's, what we want to do. And I don't know if that's an option, I do think that they've been very flexible in a lot of the other things that they were willing to do.
Okay, good.
Roger.
Thanks. Anything else, Brad? Good. Who's next? Okay, Dave.
Excuse me, Mr. Spina, before you sit down, I've got a couple of questions for you regarding the security concerns that you have. You specify the level of security. There's on-site security staff. There's cameras galore, I assume. Isn't there other alternatives than having a push-button box? Can't people check out with security when they're leaving? And I'm sure there's video cameras that will see that vehicle pulling up to the gate, and then security could release them out.
I'm sure there is. I'm not sure the impact it has on the request here.
Well, it has an impact. You're saying that you need to have that vehicular gate closer to the sidewalk.
Oh, on this gate right here? Yeah.
To do that, whereas there are other options.
There are.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think this is one that their security team thinks is the best option.
And I understand that their security concerns are for their employees of the building. But has anybody really looked at what maybe the security concerns are for the neighboring school? You say you have 50 to 100 people protesting out there. Maybe a property that requires this level of security isn't best located right next to a school.
Well, this is a family office, okay? So this has nothing to do with a business that some protesters think has to do with it. It's a family office. It's not Purdue Pharma. And so what somebody does on their own time that wants to protest in front of some random building, I don't know what to say about that. I will tell you this family that owns this building has met with the school and I can't speak for the school, but because I made the introduction, I think that you would find that they're a very friendly neighbor and that the school probably, look, we all had different thoughts when we found out who was bought the building, but, it's a family office. And they now own the building, they pay taxes, and they have rights. And I think what they're doing, this was not like just, hire me to do this. This was something that I was passionate about. I live in this community too. And I think what they're asking for is a really good alternative.
Okay. You specify here that the concerns are security, yet we haven't had any professional testimony here today, which also concerns me. If security was your main concern with this, I would have thought that you would have had some expert testimony.
If you guys feel it'd be better, we'll defer till next month and we'll bring the security team, including if you guys can help, we'll bring the City of West Palm Beach Police Department. We're okay. That's, they want to get their security fence up, but when's the next meeting? A couple weeks,
Every month.
Yeah. Look, I agree. I can't argue that. So you want to hear it from the expert? I'm not an expert. I'm an architect. So
Okay.
if we
Well, I think we
get,
have some written testimony to that effect, but personal or written, either way.
yeah,
The written testimony was very broad, very general, not site-specific, and
Right. Okay. Anything else, Dave? Greg, you want to chime in here on your first meeting? Okay, we'll let you wait. I know Michael's got some.
Yeah, I have a question for staff regarding the type of fence that was described as, by the applicant as a spiky fence. Is there any type of regulations as to the type of fence that we have that would constrict this particular type of fence? I mean, I walk through the downtown every day. There's not a lot of fencing up. That I guess I don't think there's any type of fence like this specifically. So is there any type of guideline as far as a fence that would have spikes on the top? Obviously, that doesn't look.
I didn't have this image in mind. Someone used theirs. You can't see it too well, but no. I mean, this is something that comes up as long as it meets the height. This type of fence is fine. We have regulations against chain link, but this type of fence would be permitted.
I know this is maybe kind of one in the extreme, but I lived in South America for 8 months, and people have broken bottles on the top of their walls. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy fence. There's barbed wire. There's nothing in our code that describes a type of fencing in the downtown.
Well, you can't have barbed wire. Yeah, you can't have no.
I'm just saying there's no verbiage that says.
No, there's verbiage that says no barbed wire. We have verbiage that you can't have chain. That's actually something we just changed when we looked at this fence regulations. You cannot have chain link fence within the maximum setback along frontages for non-residential uses. So, but these types, that's fine. That's really all we have is no barbed wire, chain link. There's nothing I'm missing, right? Yeah, that's wrought iron.
Okay. And I guess where I stand at this point, I maybe just thinking about the comments David made. If security is the issue, if that's really why we're agreeing to all these different variances, I would really like to understand what the real security concerns are. Again, I walk throughout the downtown often. There's not a lot of fencing up for commercial properties or residential. So this is, obviously a new business moving into the area, and we have all sorts of variances being sought for fence height increase and setbacks. It's a lot. We don't normally see a request like this, especially for someone new. I mean, I know a couple months ago we had a variance request in the Northwest because this particular owner, operator had incidences. There was reasoning for the request that was based on history. From staff reports, it sounds like over the last 2 years there has been no incidents in this area for commercial properties. So I guess I just have to kind of take a step back here and say, I would agree with staff on all the recommendations, but if we're going to move forward with these approvals and these variances, I would want to know more about really why we're needing it in this particular area, and when we don't have any past history. So I would defer to think more about this with some other testimony that kind of explains the need for this. So
I think they're just establishing it as a preventative measure based on the nature of the family and circumstances. So that's all I understand.
yeah, I know they made reference to this one protest that had happened. I mean, they chose to pick this spot in the downtown. This is a new business, so again, I think maybe Stephen had made that point as well. So doesn't seem like we have a lot of history here, and we're kind of building these walls and asking for variances when an area that doesn't have any history for criminal activity or a need to make these types of changes. So.
All right. Okay. Nick, you got anything?
Yep, just kind of maybe starting off with the easy stuff. The landscaping on the east side is pretty much doable. We've had some other projects. Alton Town Center, as an example, has those exact same kind of small triangular spaces. So I don't see any problem with the hedges on that to add that landscaping and try to, I guess, make it a little more green. And sort of concurring with some of the board members, it would be nice to hear that specific reason why from the security experts, as opposed to just that they're security experts on some of these issues. So that'd be mine.
Yeah, all right. Good commentary. I think most everyone touched on my questions, but I just had a kind of series of thoughts and questions here. So we talked, I'm glad you talked with the neighbors as the applicant. Were any other neighbor issues no other comments from anyone next door on the?
We did not specifically talk to the neighbors, and I didn't have any contact
All right.
for or against. I'm sorry. Well, yes, sorry. Other than mailers were sent out for 500 feet within the property.
The circulation, the one-way, I think I understand the nature of these requests. So tell me, I see 7th as more of an alley. Is there any differentiation between a major street versus an alley in terms of fence heights?
If it was an alley, which this wasn't, they would be able to have a 6-foot fence, but
Okay.
this is a street designation on our figure 4, which classifies as.
Yeah. I guess
it
I've
as
always
a-
just
Yeah.
sort of perceived it as an alley over the years in any event. So, and it's going to have planting on both sides of that fence. The site triangle, the safety issues were all addressed, right, with staff. Yeah, so I guess in general, given the circumstances, I think if this gate's on 6th or set back to a situation, my most critical comment would be just to see the design of that gate. I think that's something that should go to historic and let them approve that and the aesthetics. That should be a well-designed gate, but I don't have a problem with the request, seeing that it will get the car off the street and it is set back to a certain distance, 5 feet. I think 4 feet just doesn't do much for a fence in terms of any type of security or restriction. So I don't have a problem with that one. Then I'll add some landscaping to the street there with just some barren pavement. And again, the alley, I don't have a problem at all with the 5 feet. It's an alleyway in my mind. That's going to be protected with a hedging. I'll leave it up to the other one with the setback of the fence on the one-way out. Again, I'm not sure it makes a big difference, again, in my mind, being an alley more so than a major street presence and frontage. I'm not as concerned with that.
I understand what you're
I'm
saying.
more concerned with that. If anything, it's that condition of the fence between the subject property and the property to the east, where it's just all asphalt. It would be, and I don't know if this applicant should bear all the responsibility for making that prettier, but that's the harshest condition visually in my mind, where that parking lot just bleeds into the alley on 7th, the property to the east. If you had that photograph there, I think you had a good photograph from the alley looking toward there. So that condition right where it says 12-foot setback, that's just a mess right there. And I think what they'll be doing will be elegant. And again, no problem with a 5-foot fence. It's just, and whether you require the landscaping in those little triangles, I'm ambiguous about that, but I don't have any general problem with the request, given the unique nature of the parking conditions that are present on the site, the circulation conditions that exist for this particular property. And I'm not even sure if there are any other conditions that are unique other than those that would be over and above that relative request.
I just want to say, granted that maybe it seems like an alley right now, but it is a street designation in downtown, and we do have to think to the future and any potential, this site won't change much with historic designation, but there's, adjacent sites that could be.
I understand the nomenclature and the designation, but it's the backside to the school, it's the backside to this property, the backside to the one on the east, it's the backside to the restaurant. So for all intents and purposes, that's the way I see it. So I don't see any negative impact on that, pedestrian experience, as it were.
There's potential future development, though, for some of those properties that aren't historically designated, that we would have them be doing the minimum setback and streetscape. And so that's what we have to think about moving forward from staff's perspective.
Is that something that the applicant would be willing to do to, if you design that gate, is to get it to the
We'd be happy to, I don't know, I mean, if we could just work with Frederic,
if you could do
we're
it on a
happy to come in.
do it on a
I agree with you. I want the gate to look good. I don't want it to big, you know,
there's some
not chain link, but it could be just as bad if you were not
there's some
careful.
components of the building, the vertical sliding there.
I think it'd be a super cool fence and gate.
Because I'd hate to see that black metal fence with the spears on top go across the
I think
front
we
there.
could agree to work with preservation staff, and I think we could also agree to landscape this whole area here so that, you know, again, you screen a bunch more parking lot.
I think if you could screen that with landscape, work on the proper depth to get the gate back that complies with the security needs and could be sort of a compromise with staff, I think that would enhance the property to the point where it would offset any other negative implications. But yeah, work on that fence for sure. And I'm happy if that's just done at a staff level. I don't think you need to go through the full historic
You're
board
happy
application.
to agree on that.
But that's my comments. That's just my thoughts. I know everybody's got a...
Can I just say one more thing? So Rich Silverberg is one of the owners, and he's here, and he doesn't want to come up because he didn't know that this was the meeting today. And that's why security wasn't here. That's why he has shorts and a T-shirt on.
That's fine. He's in
And
Florida.
I
He
said, well,
can
come
wear
on up.
shorts.
And he goes, no, I'm not going up there. I feel so disrespectful. But come on up here.
Oh, you're good.
My name is Richard Silverberg. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Summer Road. I did not intend to come here in shorts and a T-shirt. I apologize.
That's okay. We'll forgive you.
I do love living in Florida, though. There's no question. Wouldn't be dressed like this in New York. There was a misunderstanding today. I did not realize that we were having this meeting. I did intend to bring my security expert and come to this meeting dressed appropriately. I thought it was taking place in approximately 2 weeks. I now know that I think that was a contingency meeting that we may have needed to come to in the event that things didn't go well today. So that's why the security expert isn't here, and that's why I'm dressed like this, trying to avoid speaking to all of you. But I thought it was important for me to come and listen to the meeting, so that's why I'm sitting in the back. I will say, I don't want to get too deep into the layout of the design. I couldn't quite follow where we were, but this corner, this northeast corner, what we were trying to do is put a pole in with an intercom and a button. You know, if a guest is leaving, we have him in the parking lot, the guest won't have a device to get out of the parking lot. So the intent would be for them to be able to buzz to be let out, or to speak to somebody inside to let them out, and also for employees to use a key card so they could swipe it and exit. That's the intent of that. When you go there and you actually see the site condition and you do the measurement, if the fence is where they want it, with this 12-foot setback, then the pole ends up in the parking lot. So I'm not opposed to a setback, but it seems like it would be very small because you need to get your car up to a location towards the fence without hitting it and still have the pole not be in the parking lot. That's what that was all about. I'm all for improving the area, the location. I want a very nice fence. I've asked the contractor to give me a very nice fence. I don't want to put up, you know, a low budget, unpleasant looking fence. So I want it to look nice. We put a lot of money into this building. We love this downtown, this area. We love the building. We're very happy to be here. Our goal, as Keith said earlier, was to possibly put in a covered, like a carport with solar panels on it. And the reason we didn't want to improve that east portion is because we think we'll have to end up probably ripping some of that out in order to put in the carport if we can move ahead with that. We think the expense of doing that improvement along the east side right now is about $28,000. So it's relatively significant. I do want it to have more greenery. Having more greenery around definitely improve the site, make it more pleasant and more valuable. It's just that I'm not sure right now is the right time to do it until we figure out if we can do that carport or not. But yeah. I really appreciate you listening to us, taking the variance request into consideration, and again, I apologize for being dressed inappropriately.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for speaking on the matter. Well, just one
Mr.
last
Chair.
comment on my part.
Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Go ahead, Greg.
For the applicant. How many protests that occurred that triggered the need for the fence?
So there was one formal protest that occurred, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And other than that, you know, we just moved out of the building about 45 days ago. And during that time, there wasn't a formal protest as happened recently, but, you know, I had to deal with a lot of weird comments from people who not only were just public citizens, but also I thought were friends. It made, you know, and the people that bought the building was not this company. It was Summer Road, you know, that runs a financial firm. And so, you know, it wasn't like the people that are protesting against a pharmaceutical company. That is not who bought the building, and that's not who's in the building. But so when you say, well, why, yeah, they knew where they were going. No, there was an investment firm moving from New York to West Palm Beach, and they wanted a beautiful office for their people, and they wanted it in a location. And so I don't know how people figured out who it was. Somebody did, though, and they did it quickly, because I had an attorney representing me, and I didn't know who bought the building. You know,
So my
it was-
follow-up question is, do you think the fence will prevent a protest?
So there have been random visitors, there have been people that have walked into the parking lot, and it's because of the association of Summer Road with this family. And I don't think that the fence is going to prevent protests, but I think a higher fence, an extra foot, is more of a deterrent. A 4-foot fence is definitely less of a security deterrent than a 5-foot fence. And that's the real reason. We want more of a deterrent. There have been other protests in other states. There was one in Connecticut. There have been some in New York. And there have also been credible threats to the family members.
Okay,
So-
because what I have in mind is the protection for both the folks inside the building and the protester as well. So this is America. People can protest, and also you have to.
I agree 100%.
You
I
have
support
to
the
put
right.
your staff in a secure position as well. But I have no really objection against the fence. It's just the request because of the safety measures. I don't see the fence as a remedy for the problem.
Well, okay, so first I want to say I support the right for people to protest, 100%. Well, that day, we left the area. We had security on site. Our intent was to let people exercise their right to protest. I'm not against that. We didn't try to fight it in any way. Again, the fence is a security deterrent to stop people from coming onto the property, to make people that work in the building and frankly the surrounding community feel more safe. I think if there's less problems at our building, there'll be less problems in the neighborhood. The idea is 5 feet is more of a deterrent than 4. As Keith said, he could easily hop over a 4-foot fence. And we feel, you know, he also mentioned that the police department was supporting a 6-foot fence. The wording from the security officer was strongly recommend a 6-foot fence. We don't want to build a fortress. We're not trying to put up a big wall. We actually want to cover as much of this fence as we can with shrubbery, with hedging. And my understanding is the hedging can be as high as we want it to be. We don't want it. We're not trying to put a 12-foot hedge. We just want a little extra security. And we want it to be balanced and fit into the neighborhood. And my personal feeling is an extra foot helps accomplish that goal in a very balanced way. And it's not to stop protests. People are allowed to protest in a public space right in front of the building, the back of the building. We don't want people coming onto the property that aren't supposed to be there. And that's really the purpose of it. And I really do feel like it will, if there's more security for our building, then there'll be more security for the surrounding community, which we think is important for everybody. We're conscious of that. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you very much for the response. I'll finish with my last comment, then we can go back to discussion. But being in architecture and having dealt with these situations with security firms, I mean, they typically are requesting, 6-7 foot fences, laser beams, you name it. So we don't have to go there, but I think this is a very reasonable agreement. I think there are a lot of unique conditions with this property, so I'm generally in favor with most of these requests, and I go forward with that. So anyone else want to chime in or formulate any kind of?
I mean, I've got some comments for discussion. There's nothing more I really have in terms of questions. You know, it's really important. I think this board clearly understands what its role is, and its role is not just to be a mechanism for an applicant to ask to depart from what the code requires. Our job is to determine whether or not an applicant meets standards for a variance under the Land Development Code and the Downtown Master Plan. Staff makes a recommendation to us. It's our job to determine whether or not the application meets those standards. Has the applicant submitted enough proof that it meets the standards within the Land Development Code? So that's what our role is. Our role is to determine whether or not it meets those. I probably come to it from a bit of a different viewpoint. I think this is all about aesthetics, and it's not about security. Security is not a hardship. If you look at the determinations under the variance standards, there has to be a hardship on the land. It has to be the building, it has to be the land or the special circumstances of the property, not the use that is coming into the property. I feel like this use maybe is creating some hardship, but that is a hardship that is being created by the applicant. And the variance standards are very specific that that's not how we should review a variance request. I understand we've considered other variances like this in the past. I think they were very different in circumstance to this request. So that's my opinion on how we need to look at it. But like I say, there's really two things here. There's the setback and there's the height. Regarding the setback, I agree with staff recommendations A through C of number 1. I'm amenable to striking through D and E. You know, the eastern gate along 7th Street to meet the minimum 12-foot setback. Now understanding how the property operates and how vehicular flow will work, and that's a one-way exit. If that gate was to be within the minimum setback on 7th Street, I really don't have an issue with that, rather than it having to meet the minimum 12-foot. Likewise with E, you know, moving the gate to meet the minimum 20-foot required. Again, 16 feet, 20 feet is not really a big issue to me. I think 16 feet is for an office use. 16 feet is still going to have enough stacking. It's going to get a vehicle off the street. It's not going to impede the flow of traffic. So that's kind of where I stand on that. But the others relate to the height. And I support staff's recommendation of denial on all of these. I feel like we haven't seen evidence today that suggests that there is a hardship on the property to support the increase in the height. And like I say, I really feel it's about aesthetics. Look, we could defer this. We could bring a security consultant in another month. The reality is security is not a hardship. To my mind, it's not a hardship under the code. So it's kind of where I stand. Look, I still think it's a great use of the property. I think a 4-foot fence is still going to achieve the purpose for what the applicant proposes to use the property for, particularly given, you know, they did go into some significant description about all the other security measures they still have on the property for people to enter and exit. So if there really is a security issue in this area and, you know, the owner and the family office are going to operate from here, it sounds like they have the mechanisms to really be able to deal with it without having to depart from the Land Development Code. I don't think the Land Development Code is going to resolve the security issues if they really are present in this location. So that's my opinion.
That's understood. Hardship has always been a difficult thing for applicants to prove, and it all comes down to technical language and the response to the list of the criteria. So take it or leave it. I always just, if someone is trying to negotiate a reasonable compromise to a solution and hardship gets in the way, I always try to err on the side that's going to be a benefit to the city and the landscape. In this case, I don't see any detriment, and I see enough of an existing condition with some of the parking and circulation where the city could get a benefit out of this project. And sometimes always just sticking to the letter of the black and white code is not a benefit, to just do it for the sake of doing it. And so, but again, we do have to, as a board, justify the request and determine it based on the language that they have to meet certain criteria. So You'll have to decide whether you think you can justify that application and the basis of their criteria request. And also look at it in the bigger picture, is it a benefit or a detriment in the general, goals of the city and the DMP? So.
Yeah, and look, I agree. I think a good compromise, has been reached here in the sense that we're willing to allow that fence in the front setback, but it needs to meet the code minimum height if it's going to be in that setback.
So you'd like to see the gate on 6 at 4 feet and not anything higher if it's at 16 feet off the sidewalk?
Yeah, I just don't really see the, to me, it's an aesthetic thing. I really don't see the justification for the 5 feet. I feel like 4 feet's appropriate. I think it will achieve what they need to achieve, particularly given everything else they've got in place to monitor that property.
And I would agree as well with that.
Respectfully, I need to clarify that if you, Mr. Graham, you were talking about removing E, we can, but they would have to come back for a separate variance to not meet that section 94.111 criteria, because that was not included in the variance request. So it wasn't advertised, it wasn't included, it's a separate regulation than what we're discussing here. The 94.111 section, which requires the 20 feet setback, it would require a separate variance to do that. So that's just something that...
Is that because it's considered a vehicular gate versus a fence? Well, why wouldn't it be the same variance as the fence within the setback?
Because it's vehicular entry.
Okay.
And it's because of the, because of the stacking. So the section that is stated here, what it intends, so if it was just a pedestrian gate, it wouldn't apply. It's vehicular stacking. So this is from the downtown parking code, that you have to have the gate 20 feet so that you're not stacking on the sidewalk and into the right-of-way. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, but in the case of, okay.
So that couldn't be like a typical condition of approval, or it has to be re-advertised?
It would, if the board decides that they want to allow for that gate and fence along 6th Street to be in that location, they would have to come back and advertise for that.
Okay, so because the plans submitted show the gate in that location, but it wasn't part of their request, so I'm a little confused.
It was, yeah,
It should have been part of this request. If it wasn't, like...
It was not stated as part of the applicant, and it was not advertised, so
well, in that case, the vehicular gate should be moved back minimum of 20 feet. Again, I don't have an issue with it being 16 feet. The applicant should have requested it as part of this application. It's ridiculous for us to have to bring it back as a separate variance, but if that's what it has to be, then so be it. But,
that was a legal,
that's kind of on them.
Legal direction received. And then in terms of for B, for installing a hedge along the inside of interior lot fences where possible, it was my understanding, I had asked the applicant if they were intending to come in through separate permit for modifications to the parking lot to add those curbs, and I was told yes. So this could still remain. There's nothing forcing them to come in for those modifications, and then all this would say is that they need to install a hedge along interior side lot fences where possible. That might only be a little portion, up where the gate is, if they don't decide to do those curb lines. So I don't think there's an issue keeping that condition in, because it wouldn't be possible for them to put it in if they didn't do the modification. So, thank you.
I had one just technical question. I don't know if engineering's here, and this could be an easy answer, but typically in entry designs, gated designs, all the communities we do, there's an emergency services vehicle kind of thing, and typically they have a Knox box. I'm just wondering, in this scenario, what happens when an ambulance needs to come, or a fire or something? How is that handled in this situation?
So when we get the permits in, it would be routed around to different departments, and that would be something covered under either electrical, building, or fire. So it would still go through the whole review process, and that would be a requirement from not zoning standards, but their standards. So that would be something.
And in most of the cases, if like in this one in particular, the building has a frontage on the street. So the fire department or the ambulance will not need to go inside the parking lot. So that's the typical situation. As long as there's an access on the street, the fire department will not care about the private access.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Brian.
Just really quick, Mr. Chair. I agree with the chairman's analysis. The site in the report, it has nonconformities associated with it. It's challenged in terms of that backside, in terms of parking can't move. They have a security issue that we hopefully can hear about. It seems as though that, that might be something that we should hear and understand what the needs are. I also agree with my other esteemed colleague in terms of, the requirements for variances and adhering to them. However, this board in the past, as the chairman has said, we've looked at case-by-case scenarios and we've granted variances that were much more impactful to the pedestrian environment, impactful to main streets versus 7th Street in this case, which is, for all intents and purposes, the back doors of everything along that street. Will it change in the future? Sure. Fences can come up, but they can also come back down. I want to ask the applicant really fast. Mr. Spina, can you come up? In terms of the landscaping doesn't seem to be a huge issue. I know you have future plans for that east side. What could you live with in terms of moving the 7th Street?
I think
back?
what I'm hearing is on 7th Street, I think, we've already agreed to back the fence up. And I didn't measure it, but I thought 20 foot was where it encroaches into the windows. I think maybe the architects on the board would say, so again, could we work with city staff to say, is it 16, 17, 18, 19, or 20? If we can get to 20 and the gate's not in the way of the window, I don't think that's an issue.
On 6th, yeah, on 6th.
And then we're going to landscape this thing like beyond belief, which they've agreed to do. The east property line, I think, up at the street when we looked at that picture, so if you're coming down 7th Street and you look across, by the way, the people next door to the east, both properties all the way to Flagler, drive in and out of the alley wherever they want. It's complete free-for-all. But we are willing to make a significant improvement to this property by landscaping as far as we can down the east property line. You will never see the fence, okay, at 5 foot high. Okay, and then the gate on 7th Street, we have been told that we need it to be a certain location. If we can work with our experts and work with city staff and agree that there's a compromise in there, I think the owners are happy to do that. We will be willing to work with the city staff and design a beautiful gate. The fence you won't be able to see, but the gate will be beautiful. And all of that, assuming we get a 5 foot fence. If we don't get a 5 foot fence, it defeats the whole entire purpose of being here for the owner. Yeah. That's kind of where we are. And if that's what we're going to get today, we'd love to hear a vote. If we're not, because someone needs to hear from security experts, then we'll come back and bring those. I'd rather not do that, but we can. That's up to you guys.
Right. Thanks. Okay. Any other questions, discussions? Anyone want to try and formulate a motion on this? So.
We're agreeable to working along the 7th Street frontage with the location of the gate because that would be covered under the setback variance.
So can you just real quick, for our edification, pull up the site plan just so we can go through these points and then.
You want the full or just 7th Street?
Just the whole thing. You had a diagram with that showed 7th. Yeah, okay, there you go. So what I'm hearing is if you could come up with a location that doesn't interfere with the windows on 6th Street, entry gates back. I'm of the opinion that a 4 foot doesn't do anything for security, so 5 feet, but that's a variance. And then the return all the way along the east side is 6 feet? What was that? Or what can that be?
The fence along the east side can be 6 feet except for
all
the
way
portion,
to the red.
except for the portions
So
within the 12 foot.
they're requesting 5 feet where it's red.
4 feet where it's red, and then.
Oh, they're requesting 5.
Right, correct,
okay.
yes.
And then you would try and figure out a solution for the distance of the fence, the sliding gate off of the 7th Street property line.
Yes.
The request is still for 5 feet along 7th, a 5 foot return, and then 6 foot back to the corner of the building. Correct? Okay. Yes. So if anyone wants to formulate some motion based on what we've heard today, so that this
and if you are doing a motion that is not agreeing with staff's recommendation, if you're going to recommend approval for one that we recommend a denial, I have been told that you do have to state specifically why you think the criteria that staff says does not comply does comply. So do they have to go one by one on that, or is it?
They need to make findings that the variance request complies with the specific variance criteria.
Sure.
Okay.
And if we make a motion, do we need to make a motion on so there's 4 variances. Do we need to make a motion on each variance individually, or can it be as a whole, or can it be approval and denial? How do we do it?
Again, it depends. If you're approving all of them, you can do a single motion, but you need to read like the specific variance and then any conditions that go along with it. You can recommend approval of some and denial of others if you choose to. Those are all options.
I guess that, yeah, the options, you're gonna come up with some variation, you're gonna either approve some or agree with the denials. I guess the question is, are we better off if this applicant is agreeable to defer this for a month to let all this stuff settle out, or do you want to go ahead and try and make a motion and vote so they can get this 5-foot, 4-foot issue off the table? So keep that in mind as you're making a motion.
That is up to you.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm telling you, I can't,
Okay.
I can't make a motion. I'm telling these guys to make
Okay.
a motion.
Mr. Chair, propose a motion to postpone.
Is there a motion to defer? Is the applicant agreeable with that? I mean, I'm sure you'd like to get it done, but it means a month wait to decide?
Look, if we can agree on a 5-foot fence and all the other things that I think have been explained, we're willing to work with city staff and come to it. We're even willing to take all the side fences down to 5 foot. So there is no 6-foot fence anywhere.
Yeah.
If we get that, we would love to hear your vote. If we don't get it, we're defer and come
No,
back and
I-
bring a, I mean, like a,
I don't think you have it.
That's where we are.
No, that's kind of correct. Understood. So I think it is kind of critical. We need, as a board, make this decision on the 5-foot versus deferring it and having a denial on a 5-foot request next month and
So-
wasting everyone's time.
Can I make a
Yep.
comment? I know you kind of joked, Kevin, about your inability to go over a 5-foot fence versus a 4-foot. We haven't heard anything to support that. And I guess, is that really what it's coming down to, whether we think people are going to jump over a 5-foot fence or not be able to jump over a 5-foot fence, where they're going to easily be able to go over a 4-foot fence? And if that's the reasoning for this, then I'm just going to go ahead and again default to staff and say that, we haven't heard anything to support that. Is that really what this is coming down to? It's a security measure that a 5-foot fence is going to prevent people from getting into this location versus a 4-foot fence. Is that the basis of this?
Bad guys can jump over 10-foot fences. So that is not, all this is a perception of security to hopefully deter a quasi-bad guy to stay away. If you get a bad person, they can get over any fence you put up. They can knock the gate down. They can drive the stolen car through the gate. So no, that is not what we're doing. The owner's security expert says 5 foot is a really good deterrent. The city of West Palm Beach police officer said 6 foot. We're happy with 5. So yeah, you're right.
And that is the case. We've heard that in the past. It's a perception. 4 foot, you can start thinking about going over 5 foot. You're like, it is.
But if you want to
I'm
go,
not-
you're going to go.
Again, they haven't
Right.
given you any proof of that, but it is.
Okay, so it's really perception.
It's a perception issue.
So at this point, we have one motion to defer. That's
Well,
correct.
there's a motion. There's no second. There's motion to defer.
And so I can make a motion, separate
There's
motion?
no second. You can, if there's no second, that motion fails. Anyone make a separate motion?
Without reading through all the criteria, but, or the specifications, I make a motion of granting the setback along 7th and denying the additional variance requests. If we get a second, I'll be happy to read it all out, or if you'd like me to read it all out right now.
So in your motion is to approve the staff recommendations,
Yes.
which is approval of the 5 foot along 7th,
No, it's approval of the setback along 7th,
the setback.
Is that subject to all of the conditions?
subject to all of the conditions, yes.
Okay, but then the denial is no 5-foot fence, right?
Correct.
Sticking with 4. Okay, there's a motion. Anyone got a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Good.
Depending on the vote, we will defer and come back and show better expert presentation.
If there's a vote, you can't defer, can you?
I know that's a complicated.
Yeah. There's a motion and
I know
a
it's just-
second
I
at this
think- I
point,
think it's
so
a-
the board
it's
has
up to the
their
applicant.
option to discuss and vote. But if you're going to move forward and there is a second, I'd appreciate it if you go ahead and read the standards into the record.
So if we have a second, just some brief discussion before you
Yes.
read the standards. Did we want to give any consideration to, as I specified for the recommendation of approval for the first variance for the setback, items D and E, whether or not, I think there was some discussion about the applicant working with staff on, an appropriate setback for the vehicular gates. I'm amenable to the applicant working with staff to determine what an appropriate location may be. If I can propose some language, if we need to modify that motion, I'm happy to do that.
I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah, it seems if that island could get extended, the geometry might work. It just seems like a little more detail in that area that could be worked out.
So do we need to
So as part of my,
play it from here?
If you'd like to modify the language of D and E, just specify what it is, and then Mr. Felton
So
can
just a point
accept
of
it.
procedure then. If it's approved, there's no, that's a denial of the 5-foot request. If it's not approved, then we go back to another motion, right?
Correct. The motion
If
on the
motion
table, right?
fails, okay, but if it's approved, then that's a denial, and then of the 5-foot request, and the applicant has no recourse beyond that. Is that correct?
The applicant has an appellate right.
An appellate right. Okay.
I would propose a modification to the motion to approve the first variance request from section 94-109 to allow the fence within the minimum setback along 7th Street with an amendment to condition 1D that the applicant shall work with staff to determine an appropriate location for the eastern gate along 7th Street. And E, the applicant shall work with staff to determine an appropriate location for the vehicular gate along 6th Street. Now, I'm pretty sure sounded like this board was comfortable with 6th Street, but it may well trigger another variance that they need to come back to us if they don't meet the 20 feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be a
I have no objection to that. I just, really should have been part of this request, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Okay. So the motion second, and then.
Mr. Felton, do you accept those modifications to your motion?
I do.
Okay. All right, good. All right, all in favor of that motion, say yes or aye.
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 Opposed? Nay?
Opposed. Nay.
So, sounds like the motion carries?
Yes.
I don't think we need roll call. How many nays were there? 1, 2? Okay. Okay, so the motion carries.
Sure. How many were in opposition? 2?
Oh, 2,
So
okay.
you have a 5-2 vote.
Yep. Okay, so. That's that. Motion carries. All right. Second item today, we have front sheet. Downtown Action Committee case number 20-02, city initiated request for.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, you need to vote on the other variances. You only vote for the location of the setback.
I thought
You need to vote on the height variances. Or the ones that
My
is-
motion was for both to approve the
Oh, okay, sorry.
setback on 7th
Apologize.
and deny the height.
Yeah, I think you agreed with staff recommendations.
Yes.
With the modifications
With the
to items 1,
modifications.
D, and E,
Yes.
which was stated by Stephen. And then agreed with 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Next case, city initiated request for DAC review and recommendation of the city commission on the proposed streetscapes improvements to Clematis Street from Dixie to Rosemary. And Ms. Aponte, just a point, I will be departing in about 10:45. I don't think it's going to matter, so, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tanu Pena. I am here on behalf of the city and CRA to present to you the last leg of this improvement to Clematis Street. Just to orient you towards the project site, as you know, we have completed 100, 200, and 300 block, and now we're going into 500 and 400 and 500 block, and looking at, also doing some minor improvements to 600 block. With this project, as we did on the other improvements to Clematis Street, we did do stakeholder engagement in which we got scheduled meetings with the various business owners. As you can see, we started our stakeholder engagement in November, and we continue on through February this month. So I am going to hand it over to our consultant, Kimberly Horn. Jonathan is going to come over and just go over with you guys the design concept, which is pretty much consistent with what you've seen, and to see how we're making sure that this fits the needs of the merchants in these particular blocks.
Thank you, Tanya. This is Jonathan Haig, Kimberly Horn, West Palm Beach, Florida. This is the existing condition of the 400 block. You can see City Hall and the library complex is on the north side of the street, and on the south side of the lower part of the page are the merchant spaces that are existing already there. So the concept, is existing condition for the 500 block as well. Again, north is to the top, south is to the bottom, and the existing condition for the 600 block. So moving into the proposed design, this is taking the design, concept that we've established in the 100 and the 200, or the 200 block, 100 block, and 300 block, and applying that to the 400, 500, and portions of the 600 block as well. For this street, there is we're retaining and actually adding a few more parking spaces to places where there are none today next to the plaza. We are retaining the book drop loading space next to the library and the kind of the open plaza space in front of the library as well. This block is going to retain the same concept of keeping the parking spaces as permeable pavers, which will create a virtual urban bioswale into a suspended pavement system under the road, under that parking aisle area, that'll provide the root space for the large live oak trees that we're bringing in. You can see the large live oaks in that space as well. So all the existing twin trunk palms that are along the street are going to be coming out, and all the live oaks are going in with date palms at the ends of the street. We're still working on the design of the area in front of the library doorways. There's some grading challenges there. This concept shows a couple of trees there that may not make it into a couple of palm trees there that may not make it into the final design. You'll also notice that we're proposing some modifications or in concept at Quadrille that would, if we're able to convince DOT to allow us to do so, to provide some effective bulb outs there to reduce the crossing distance across Quadrille. We'd love to make this happen, and we're beginning to engage DOT in that effort as well. So this is again a little summary of the 400 block. We're reducing the auto space and increasing the people space. This is the 500 block. Again, we're not able to do pretty much anything within the railroad right-of-way at this point, so none of the streetscape treatments will continue through that right-of-way. We are engaging them as well to try and do some sort of, perhaps some decorative treatments to the asphalt to make it appear like we have some continuation of the sidewalk through there. Looking at the, again, the same treatments on this street, we're retaining the mid-block trees and the trees at the ends of the street as well, the existing live oaks. And in this particular street, there will be no date palms introduced in this particular concept. We're looking at this street, we've got a drastic increase in the people space and a reduction in parking along the street. And that was consistent with our meetings with the merchants. Some people asked for no parking on the street, but we were able to retain some and still create the functionality that the street deserves. The 600 block is going to get some minimal treatments. Right now, we're only looking at replacing pavers on the sidewalk, keeping the street as a curbed street through the up to the intersection at Rosemary, although there's some portions of that intersection at Rosemary where we'll be modifying to create the ramp up into the curbless section. So you'll see that in the shaded areas on that street. We're also going to look at replacing the twin trunk Washingtonian palms that are on the north side of the road with live oaks. The south side of the road largely has existing canopy trees, although in front of the existing tower, residential tower, there is some existing palm trees. It'll probably have to remain because they're planted so close to the facade. And some perspective views. These were created by Dover Cole, showing some imagery, what this will possibly look like. This is the plaza to the right of City Hall Plaza. Looking at the decorative treatments. Again, we're going to continue with the same design language with the ball bollards, the gray toned street pavers, the bold crosswalks. We're going to, at the mid blocks where we have the existing trees, because those are planted at a little bit higher elevation, we created the custom seating element that creates a little bit of earth retainage there so that we can keep those trees in those locations. And you'll see that repeated along this design. This is the quadrille concept. Again, we're just starting to meet with DOT on this. This bulb-out situation will help resolve some of the grading issues at that intersection, though, that have with the steep approaches to the railroad, and hopefully we can make this happen. And this is some imagery of the 500 block. That just to orient yourselves, this is the space next to Subculture is on the right there with the mural painted on the side of the building. This is again a view looking west from that space next to Subculture. And the mid blocks with the seating elements. This is the section of the road and describing the modification in the lane width, and this is consistent with what has been done on both the 300 block, the 200 block. The 100 block is a little different because of the two one-way pair streets, so it's a little bit different configuration.
So we have received or looked at the comments from staff in regards to protecting the landscapes based on the current trends we've noticed in the areas, in the blocks that we've already completed. So we're going to be working with our design consultants to remedy that so that we can retrofit it for the blocks we've already completed and make sure it's integrated into this current design. And also we're going to factor into the design areas where the public can seat, which is not related to where the restaurants are, to make sure the public still has use of the space and not just dedicated to restaurant owners. So we hope that you will look favorable on this design so we can complete the corridor and approve it. Thank you.
Ana Maria Ponte, City Urban Designer, for the record. The design team already went through all the explanation of the design. I'm just going to focus on the 4 or 5 recommendations that the staff is presenting at this point. We're recommending that the following elements are considered, and this is, as Sinu said, we have been discussing internally how to solve these issues. These are things that we're facing as the project moves forward. We're identifying new options. We tried to implement certain things with the 200 block, and they did not have the effect that we're hoping, so we are now have to take a kind of more dramatic measures to protect the plant material. One is specifically adjust the design to provide additional protection for the planting areas adjacent to the parking spaces. What we have noticed is the cars definitely clip on the planting, and we have even noticed that even people on the areas that are not adjacent to the parking spaces, people also clip on the corners. So we are exploring with the designers different options to see how we can manage this, because the clipping is not allowing the plant material to grow and thrive as they were originally conceived. So that definitely is a point that we need to work with the designers and find a solution, a viable solution for the entire project. One other thing that we discussed in previous phases is the addition of public seating. The design was conceived with the seating or these concrete benches around the big oaks in the center, and they are heavily used by people. They have the shade and they are nice, but we have identified that definitely we need to provide, and these probably will be kind of an added funding additional to the streetscape to provide some tables and chairs for people to generally sit in the along the corridor. The picture on the right, it was one regular lunch hour. It was kind of interesting as an anecdote in that I was sitting having lunch in one of the tables for Jimmy Jones. I have one sandwich, and I just saw this table on next to me. They were like 5 people. Each of them have their own lunch. One of them have the lunch that they brought from home, and the other 4 people have lunch from different places. Each of them had different restaurants. So each of them basically went, bought their lunch, and then just came to this place and sat together to share the lunch. So it's a really interesting concept, something that we want to see on the street. So we want to establish some mechanisms so we can put out tables and chairs that are not tied to a particular restaurant. The challenge in this is who's gonna basically take care of these tables and chairs at night, where they put them. So we're working with the DDA about that and trying to brainstorm what is the best option for that. The other one that we wanted to make a recommendation is regarding the bike parking. Definitely the 500 block has less bike racks than the other blocks, so we're recommending at a minimum to have the same number, and if possible add additional, maybe around the corner or another location. So that's one thing that we're working with the design team also. And then the last one is one that, as Jonathan said, we are doing everything we can to try to see if we can work with FEC and FDOT to do improvements on the areas that are not controlled by the city. One of the improvements that we're recommending, and staff is trying to see if we can get an agreement with FDOT and FEC about this, is just minor aesthetic improvements on this crossing. We're recommending, for example, just simply cut the asphalt on a straight line so it doesn't look like it's poor and like just sloppy work. And that will definitely improve the aesthetics. Also pouring the gravel that is set next to the road between the tracks, just as a consistent layer, so you can see that it's kind of part of the design. And one last one that we think is a safety issue is the separation between the pedestrian path and the travel lanes, because at this point there are no elements that separate the two. We have seen people walking on the road without even noticing that they are out. So we think at least a more consistent striping is necessary to really clearly differentiate the two of them. Those are minor things that we're hoping FEC will be amenable to, and staff, the design consultants are meeting with them and trying to work out these minor elements. We are very happy with the results. I think we have received good input from the community, and we're looking forward to the last phase of the project to be completed by the end of this year. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Ms. Aponte. So are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this issue? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to the board for any questions and comments.
I just have one question with the slide where we're showing the potential bulb out on Quadro. And it looks like, I think today there's a lane that goes straight, and then there's a turning lane there onto Clematis going east. So the image, I believe, doesn't have that turning lane.
Yes.
What's, I guess, the probability that is FDOT would be involved in helping do this, make these changes?
Well, we're proposing the changes to FDOT, and one of the things we actually have to do is look at the traffic count there to see how many turns at what point in time, and to see if we can eliminate that lane. It's a safety issue right now for us. The intent is to have that lane be a through and a turn, so that, you know, it's a more safer turn for pedestrians. But FDOT will have to approve that. We're hoping that they would.
Okay, now, I guess I'm looking at the slide now. It looks like there still are, there is 2 lanes.
I'll go
It's
to
a
the
left
area
turn
view.
and
Hold on.
straight through.
Hold on.
Because there's actually
Yeah, that was the slide that
there's
I was.
actually 3.
Oh,
This one?
correct. So that's the Clematis Quadrille intersection, correct?
It is.
Okay. But then the other slide, I thought it still showed two lanes. I guess I think it's
They're
fantastic
different
Oh,
angles.
okay. To narrow that and make that.
There's a turn lane. There's a left turn lane onto Clematis, plus the through lane
Yes.
shown in this slide.
Right, you see where the silver
Okay.
car is? Right next to it will be your through and your right turn lane. And then there's a left turn lane. We didn't eliminate the left turn lane.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm 100% for that. That crossing quadrille there is dangerous, and I mean, that looks fantastic. I guess, do we have a timeline as far as, are they going to be able to make a decision on this before you would start the project? And if not, then it's just going to stay the same. Is that the default? Well, it won't change. And
Right. And honestly, we've been making design decisions throughout the process, even while under construction with the CM at risk that we already have on board. So getting its approval after our May 1st construction breaking ground date is not going to impede the process. What will impede the process if that decision comes late in the summer or, you know, trickles off into the early fall, and then that does become a scheduling and constructability issue.
And then one other question as far as the seating, more seating that we're proposing. Did we see any locations or images of that, or is that just kind of, we're still going to see that go through the design phase?
We will explore, I mean, and determine what areas are depending of the results. I mean, there are seating areas that will be basically existing restaurants will use with the Sado Cafe application. So these will be areas that don't have currently a business that will occupy that outdoor space. So we'll just, then we will just identify certain areas where maybe it's appropriate to have additional seating.
Okay. And I know on the 200 block, there's these round, maybe 18 to 24 inch pedestals that I guess are really for seating. They're not for eating. They're really for seating.
Yes.
So will we see more of those? And those, and what you're talking about for actual dining will be different than.
Yes, we're talking about more tables and chairs for people to eat their lunch.
Right. And will they be like permanently fixed?
No, we don't
Okay.
think so, and that's part of the issue. We need to identify a kind of a partner, a business partner that will take care of the chairs, taking them in at night and things like that. So that's why it's a little tricky how that's going to be implemented. So we're exploring options at this point.
Okay. So, and I guess to go back to those round pedestals, which I see people using for different purposes, well, are those going to continue onto the 500 block? Are those being viewed as favorable by the public and by city staff?
Well, I think the idea with those was we had a comment, I think from the DDA, that with those round seating around the tree planters, you know, if you're a family of 5 and you're sitting around a round space, you're kind of all facing different directions. So we thought that the idea of bringing in some, effectively a large stool that we could put in those, so people could face each other and talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea, I think, is consistent with the tables and chairs, you know, giving people a place to sit, converse, enjoy the space.
Yeah, and again, these are movable objects, so they don't have to. We don't have to finalize for this design. Even the blue stools that you're referring are movable, so they can, depending on how the space evolves, we can move them in a different locations. If we end up with the tables and chairs, the movable tables and chairs are more used by people, we can put more of those and remove the blue ones. I mean, it's kind of a flexible space that we can adapt depending on how the people start using the streetscape, basically.
Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't know those big pedestals were movable. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anna Maria, do you folks have a backup plan if FDOT won't allow for the removal of the dedicated right turn onto Clematis? I mean, I like the Bulbo, but I understand the AM peak is kind of the tough time. It bottlenecks right there because everyone's trying to cheat to get into the through lane to get to the courthouse and beyond. I travel it every day, and the right turn lane may be, not so busy, but everyone's trying to push themselves into the through lane, and if a couple people get into the left dedicated to go west, but if they deny it because of maybe traffic considerations, is there an alternate design that keeps that lane and still tries to enhance that one leg of the intersection?
I mean, if the right lane if FDOT does not authorize the removal of the right turn lane, it just remains as it is right now. Dedicated right turn is not supposed to be a true lane. It's a right turn lane only.
Correct.
So the only thing is that the bulb out will still be extended on the north side.
Right.
So it will be more difficult for people to cheat the.
And you would still have the same consistent paving patterns that are going to carry down the rest of the street regardless. Like the materials would still look the same as what's being proposed.
We have, we've designated where we're going to terminate, so it's a smooth transition with the existing. But we're going to be using the same material all the way through.
This intersection will not have pavers.
Yes, DOT does not allow us to use pavers in the intersection, so we would not be using pavers, and that's why you don't see the clematis flower in the middle of that. We have to go with DOT standards there.
For the FEC crossing then, is staff looking to put in the stamped asphalt? What they do is what they did in Northwood, where they shave the asphalt down and paint it, and it's very, very minimally invasive.
We will have to talk with FEC to see what they allow us. At this point, what we are just showing is just simply just having a larger white stripe to indicate people the separation between the two. We will talk with them and see what
tough,
things.
And that's why.
Yes. So I mean, that's why we're going with the minimum that we think is like not asking for much, but we will talk with them definitely.
But I think that's a great solution that they did in the north end, and it's like not that invasive. So and it has such a powerful impact with the paint and just the minimal shaving of the asphalt down. It probably maybe that would be a good push versus trying to get anything more than that with FEC.
So, quick comment for the traffic count. If you reach out to TPA, they could provide that to you quicker for the traffic counts, even though it's projection that you need for future counts.
We'll do that then. Thank you.
Okay, and the second one, we do get a lot of crash at the crossings, so try to push forward for as much safety for the pedestrian as possible, because there is a high crash. People not familiar with the train that's going by, so look into that.
Okay, we will. Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I'd echo is same kind of comments on the FEC. I know, typically we always like to go and ask for more and expect less. In this case, you kind of got to just shoot for the bare minimum and hope for the best. So, yeah, I certainly would encourage, maybe trying to, what you propose is good, but maybe some pavement marking for the pedestrian path of travel. I think if we could put that on the table with them, it's worth asking at least. So, yeah.
That's duly noted. Thank you.
Just had a couple comments too, so thank you for that photo with the corner clips and the landscaping that's damaged. Can I hear a little bit more about what those potential solutions are? I'm guessing it's going to be some kind of hardscape fix because it's vehicles rolling over those, as opposed to a bollard that would get knocked down or knocked over.
We're throwing out a whole bunch of different ideas at this point, but we haven't made a decision yet as a group with the city. But yeah, you're right. we've talked about extending the flat surface of the hardscape, but you give the cars more room to drive on, they're going to take more room from the edges. We're discussing the potential for curbs. We're discussing the potential for some kind of post or something there, but we haven't come to an agreement yet about what everyone wants to do.
Okay. I would suggest maybe just, again, keeping that flush design. I think any kind of curb or bollard is going to be problematic in the future. And if it's just simply, a triangle of some nice, tasteful hardscape materials, whether it's pavers or something else, that would seem to alleviate the problem and sort of fix it, in my opinion. So that would be a good one to...
We are basically taking pictures of the ones that have been damaged, and it's incredible, but the cars pretty much go really close to the trunk because once the first plant is gone, they keep going, basically. So it is definitely an issue. We're trying to explore different options and trying to find a solution that does not impact the curveless design or vision that was created for the street. But we think something will have to be installed in there to avoid that.
Okay. And then out of curiosity, the parcel of land that's at the southwest corner of Quadrille or Clematis and the tracks, is that part of the power station or is that privately owned? What's going on in that blank area?
Yes, that is an empty lot. It's privately owned. The city owns the little sliver next on the west side of the new access road, the new Quadrille place. Actually, an application was submitted last month and is going to be BRC tomorrow for, we think it's a very exciting project. It's kind of a, they are currently a temporary use, but it's a long-term temporary use. So it's a one-story, it has an event space in the center. And it has some small food vendors and beverage and retail along framing Clematis and the new access road. It's called Clematis Street Station, yes, for now, yes. And we think it's an exciting use. We'll have all sorts of events inside, like from concerts, but also yoga events and family events. That's the way they are presented to the city. So it's going to site plan review tomorrow, actually.
Great, thank you.
So it will come soon.
And then I was downtown, I can't remember what day it was, I think last week, the 500 block was closed. Is that a regular festival event or programming element? Or?
The merchants in the 500 block made a proposal to the city, and they are testing the option to close the 500 block from Friday at, I think it's 5 o'clock to Sunday evening to do kind of different events in there. So it's a test that are doing through to spring. And I think depending on the results, the concept is like they could continue doing that afterwards.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. Any other comments or
I have one comment
questions?
briefly. What I've noticed at Olive and Clematis, or Dixie and Clematis, is when cars, particularly work trucks or trolleys, are making a left-hand turn, which in this photograph would be a turn from where the truck is that is proceeding on the left side of the screen. If it was making a turn next to the green car, making a left there, it gets if the green car in this picture is very nicely back behind the white line, but very frequently they're not. And I see trolleys or trucks stop because they can't make the turn because it's so narrow. And then everybody stops because the intersection is blocked and nobody can go anywhere until people back up and unlock the grid. Will this intersection be similarly tight, or will there be a little extra room for the big vehicles to proceed?
We will evaluate that with the auto turn to make sure we can fit the trolley and the fire truck, but the design is consistent with what we've done on 200, 300 block, but that is a good point that we will take into consideration and make sure we address.
Okay, and this where the I think we've called it the bulb out is on the corner. Sometimes we have round. I think on Clematis there's round concrete balls that are there, and you'll notice they're all marked up from cars that have hit them. Just something to consider.
Yes.
That this might be a little tight.
So Quadrille is going to be curbed. You won't have the big round balls here. That's why we're not showing it.
Okay.
So that's the difference between that and our streets. Go ahead.
I can add one more to address that comment. On the 300 block, we did have the on the 300 block, the ball bollards that are on the corners, we're probably a little too aggressively close to the intersection. On the 200 block, if you look at the intersection at Olive, in that particular intersection, we moved the ball bollards back another 1.5 feet, and I think there's been a little more clearance for the cars to be able to use that intersection a little more easily, but less friction, let's say.
Okay. Good, just something to consider.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No comments? Thanks for the presentation. Very nice to see the update. I think it's a great streetscape project. Seems like it's very successful, so congratulations and looking forward to the construction.
I will need a motion from the board.
Oh, thank you.
Motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item on the list is C, code revision cases. Any code revision cases? No. Next item is other business. Does anyone have any other business to discuss on the board? I just had one question. I'm trying to remember my ethics training and sunshine law training, and so I think everybody on the board, especially with the new members, aware that we can't discuss any of the cases before the hearings, nor can we communicate, as Hope reminds us, in the emails, etc. And I'm trying to remember, does the sunshine law extend to any kind of discussion or comments of cases after the vote, whether it's right after the meeting or 6 months later?
So once it's voted on, it does not continue to extend unless, for example, the case that came before you earlier today with the variance, you voted on that. But in the event that they came back with a subsequent variance related to it, which is an item that was discussed today and is anticipated to come before the board, you cannot discuss an item of that nature.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it. Any old business? No? Old business? That brings us to adjournment. Thanks, everybody.